Hello students, today we are going to talk about a particular scholar, his name being Stuart Hall and his work. But rather than talking about the scholars overarchingly, as in the sense that talking about his work in general, we are going to focus on one particular communication theory proposed by this scholar. And the name of this communication theory being encoding, decoding. Now, you may simply go to Google and type out Stuart Hall, followed by encoding, decoding, and very easily you will find the essay, in the sense the PDF version of the essay. So, after you listen to my lecture, it will be really nice if you can go to the essay and read it in entirety. But before I kind of dissect what Stuart Hall means by these terminology, by these terms encoding and decoding, let's go ahead and talk about some of the earlier communication ideas which we had. And I will begin with talking about one particular theory, and the name of the theory being magic bullet theory. Right? You must have heard this magic bullet theory. It's a very common theory. Now, according to this theory, when we watch a media content, right, the content hits us like a bullet. Okay, and the moment we are mentioning a bullet, which means that we do not have a choice, right? We, in the sense, the audience, do not have a choice at all. It is completely hit by a bullet, and we are affected by the message we are watching. If I ask you what is the problem with this theory, I mean, there's no problem. I mean, it's true that media contents are sometimes very powerful and we do get affected by media content. But at the same time, I'm sure you will agree with me that using the statement that we are kind of hit by a bullet is something very stark, in the sense that this puts the audience in a position where they are completely useless. This puts the audience in a position where they do not have a thinking power of their own, right? So we are just affected by the media content. Let's talk about few other theories. We know about agenda setting theory, which tells about that the media kind of sets the agenda for us for the day, right? So basically it tells us what is the most important news or what is the most important content for us to in that particular day. Again, there's a problem with this. The moment we say that the media has the capability of deciding what is the most important news for the day, somehow puts the audience in a very powerless situation. Powerless in the sense that we do not have the mind or the brain of our own to kind of understand and decipher for ourselves, or in simple words, just to judge, the media content which we are consuming. Similarly, the spiral of silence or some of the other, I'm not kind of talking about all of them in entirety, but there are several media theories which kind of is indicative of the fact that the audience is kind of not so powerful, that the audience is somehow unconscious, that the audience is someone who can be affected by media content. And that's why, of course, I'm not denying all of this. How can you deny all of this? Because if all of this is completely denied, that propaganda would have been a false statement. Propaganda means that to kind of mold audience understanding with the aid of media content. Right from Hitler to Kim Jong-Lee and South Korea, and there's so many narratives of propaganda narratives, and there's endless kind of situations and propaganda. Stuart Hall is not trying to negate the idea that media is powerless, so to say, but at the same point of time, the people on the other end, that is the sender and the receiver, saying that the receiver is powerless is something which this particular scholar is kind of challenging. And that's where Stuart Hall theory of encoding, decoding was very new, was very fresh in context of what kind of we knew or the kind of media theories which were proposed early on. When I talk to you about communication, what are the common elements which comes to your mind? A sender, right? Sender, who is a sender? Sender is somebody who is sending the message across. So in this situation where you are sitting in a computer or you're looking at me from your cell phone, I am the sender. I am sending the information to all of you. There's a message. Message is basically my content, the content which I'm delivering. And it can be any kind of message, but right now the message I'm delivering is about the scholar called Stuart Hall, and all of you sitting on the other end are basically the receiver. Of course, there are all sorts of communication or types of communication, as a matter of fact, and types of communication means that this is, say, suppose this is a mass communication, because there are a lot many people who are outside, you're looking at me, a lot of people are kind of, this message is being disseminated to. When the same talk I give in my class, it's a group communication because I'm giving the message to a group of people. When I talk the same thing with a friend, it's each other. It's an interpersonal communication. Two people are communicating with each other. And if I talk myself with a nice cup of tea, of course it is intra. Sometimes it's intra communication. That is, I'm communicating with myself. So all these kinds of communication are, of course, different types of communication. But there's always, and particularly if I'm not talking about interpersonal and intra communication, and I'm particularly focusing on mass communication because that's what Stuart Hall also does. He's particularly talking about mass communication. There's always a sender, a receiver, a message, and very importantly, sometimes we forget about this, there's also a feedback involved. What is a feedback? Simply all of you or I'm sure when you're hearing me on the other end, you're sometimes nodding your head. I can't see that, but I'm sure you're doing it. So that's a feedback, right? Now, feedback is a very important part of the communication loop, and it becomes very, very important for us in the classroom because students do nod their heads. So we receive a feedback that the communication is successful. But often in case of mass communication, that is the communication which is happening with the aid of a television or a radio or some other medium, then we often do not receive the feedback. Of course, the feedback, say suppose if you're watching in YouTube and you write a small comment, that's a form of feedback as well. Other element is also the medium. Right? What is the medium? Is it a one-to-one communication? Then you are not using a medium. But for example, right now, there is a medium. The medium is that you are watching me on TV or your cell phone or your laptop. So there's a medium of communication. So let's revise one by one again. There's a sender, right? There is a message. There is a receiver. There is a feedback. There is a medium. Right? So all of these elements. And of course, one more thing which we sometimes forget about, it's called the noise. What is a noise? So for example, right now, the noise of the AC becomes too loud. So that's a noise, right? That's something which is unwanted. What is a noise? Noise is something which is unwanted. So the AC noise might be unwanted. So that becomes a noise, the simplest example of noise. Or my dog just suddenly starts barking, right? While I'm communicating to you, and all of you can hear the dog barking. So that's again a noise. These are examples of physical disruptions, right? Physical noise. There can be other forms of noise as well. For example, I start talking in Bengali, right? Kemon acho tomra. But many of you sitting on the other end, perhaps you don't know the language Bengali. So then that's also a noise because I am sending the message in Bengali, but the receiver out there does not know my language. So it's of course a barrier. The communication did not happen. The communication was not successful. In Sanskrit, there is a word for communication. It's called sadharanikaran, right? So the two hearts need to correspond for the communication to happen. So that is only possible when two people who are communicating with each other are sort of on the same plane. But often, sometimes due to physical barriers or sometimes due to different kind of barriers of communication, which leads to noise basically, such communication does not become very effective. So that's an example of a bad communication. What could be the possible barriers in communication? I've just spoken about language, but there can be other reasons. For example, one of you is very hungry, right? At the same point of time, you have to finish watching this lecture today. That itself is a barrier in communication. The communication will not be very successful when you're very hungry, right? Or, for example, you're not in the correct state of mind to study at this point of time. That's also a barrier in communication, okay? Sometimes our ideologies might not match, right? So I might be speaking on one line and you might be completely, you don't agree to my ideology. Say I say Kolkata is a lovely city, but you don't agree to it, right? You somehow are unhappy with the city in general. Then it's a barrier. The communication, the message I'm trying to send you will not be received in the manner in which I am sending you. The moment I talk about these barriers in communication, automatically you will understand that I am putting you in a powerful position. You in the sense, the audience in a powerful position. I'm not saying that you all are sitting there and I'm going to say, oh, Kolkata is the best city in the world and you should just come here and settle down and so on. And all of you are going to agree blindly to what I'm saying. Just because I'm somebody who is kind of announcing it on TV in a MOOC course and so on and so forth. Which means the moment I say that I'm not sure, all of you will agree to me or not, then I'm putting you in a powerful position. Right? I am putting you in a thinking position. I'm acknowledging your presence. And this is what Stuart Hall does in his essay, Encoding, Decoding. That is, he puts the audience in a powerful position. He puts the audience, or he acknowledges the presence of the audience. And this brings me to the theory which is proposed by Stuart Hall and his particular ideas on communication. And he has named his elements or structures or parts, just now I told you sender, receiver, feedback. So he kind of proposes a different framework, which we will talk about now. Let's have a look at this framework, and I give you 1 second just to have a look at this. Stuart Hall in his model proposes that a sender sends a message. And of course, this message is being sent on the basis of a couple of things. Number one, the framework of knowledge, right? So I might not be giving you a chemistry lecture because it's outside the framework of my knowledge. I will create a communication, that is a talk, a communication, on the basis of my framework of knowledge as a sender. I will frame my lecture, I will frame my communication on the basis of the technical infrastructure. Of course, if this would have been a small group of students in my class, perhaps my framework of this lecture would have been a little different. And of course, I will also define or decide on what I'm going to speak on the basis of the relation of production. Relation of production in that other sense also, what is my, what kind of audience I'm catering to. If I wouldn't been addressing kindergarten students, perhaps the same thing I would have tried and explained in completely different manner altogether. So a sender on the basis of these criteria conceives a message and throws it, I call it throw it, at the receiver. But there is a particular term which Stuart Hall is using. He's telling it encoding. So I, as a sender, on the basis of the technical infrastructure, on the basis of my framework of knowledge, on the basis of the relation of production, and so on and so forth, right? I assign on the meaning structure and I encode the message, right? Almost like computer codes it out for us. So I encode the message. And then this encoded message is then decoded by the receiver. And the reason why he's using encoding and decoding as terms instead of just using sender and receiver, because encoding and decoding means that the moment you decode a message, then you decode it according to your own framework. Your in the sense, the audience own framework. So here the audience will also decode on the basis of the frameworks, right? And what are these framework? Framework of knowledge, right? If you have a basic idea of communication and mass communication and so on, you will decipher it in one way. Communication students will understand my lecture in one way. Physics honors students might just not understand half the words, or might be completely confused about what I'm talking about. So then you will also decode the message on the basis of your framework of knowledge. Similarly, you will also decode the message on the basis of technical infrastructure. Say the laptop is creating unnecessary noise, right? You will not clearly understand what I'm trying to say on the basis of your technical infrastructure, right? You are listening it half-heartedly in your computer. Again, the same output will not happen. So the criteria which previously were only ascribed to the senders, now Stuart Hall says that the audience is equally powerful, that the audience also deciphers the knowledge on the basis of their framework of knowledge, on the basis of their technical infrastructure, and so on and so forth. And therefore, Hall proposes that there are 4 stages of communication. And let's look at these 4 stages. These stages are: number 1, production; number 2, circulation; number 3, use, that is distribution or consumption; and lastly, the reproduction. What is production? This is the stage in which a message is encoded. I have just explained to you what do I mean by encoding. That is, the creator of the message, that is I in this scenario, uses his or her personal experience, social context, right, in order to code the meaning based on his or her understanding of the society, dominant ideologies, beliefs, and values. If this is difficult to understand, just I'm making it more simpler to you. When I'm teaching communication, right, I am teaching you communication on the basis of my understanding, right? So I am important here. I, in the sense, the sender is important here. A different person, a different scholar would have explained to you in a different manner altogether. So my method of encoding the content, message, will be very different from a second scholar or a second person who will perhaps encode the same message. So I is powerful here. After production, it's the circulation, right? What is circulation? The way in each individual, that is you now, from I to you, the way each individual perceive things, visual versus written, based on the social context. How things are circulated influence how audience members will receive the message and put in use. Remember, I was talking about the medium, right? This is very similar to that. How is the message circulated? Is one person going to give you and give you pamphlets of what I'm talking about? Or this is like, in fact, not only that, how I'm sitting while delivering the message, right? What is the pitch of my voice while delivering the message? So all of this is definitely will have an impact on the message which is being disseminated. Distribution or consumption, that is the use. This is the stage called decoding. This is where you are powerful, right? Where the listener interprets the message based on his or her own social context. And this is where you become important. So I might be saying Kolkata is a beautiful city, but you will accept the message, negate the message, throw away the message based on your ideas about the city, based on how much you love the city, and so on and so forth. So it's your ideology, it's your understanding, it's your knowledge framework, right? It's your active or not so active participation in the communication process, which will lead to the fact that whether communication will be successful or not. And finally, he also talks about reproduction. This is the stage where after the audience members have interpreted the message in their own way, based on based on their own experiences and beliefs, then they react to the message. This is very similar to feedback. So they react to the message. So I say Kolkata is beautiful and you accept my message, and then you decide to live in Kolkata. So that's how you react to the message. That's how you bring it to action. Or you negate my message, say, and you do not, you decide to leave, so on and so forth. So I might be giving you very, very lame examples, but you get what I'm trying to talk about. So individuals will take action based on the message, right? Or will not take the action and will do something completely opposite based on the message. That is, the audience is here very powerful in this particular communication model. Stuart Hall, he has coined a particular word. It's called lack of fit, right? Remember I told you sadharanikaran, that is two hearts being on the same plane for the communication to happen. So that often does not happen because of lack of fit. Now you might say, ma'am, the same thing, you're talking about barriers of communication. Yes, you might say so, that, the concepts of barriers of communication and the concept of lack of fit might be similar. So lack of fit is basically where, the communication did not happen as it was intended to, right? So if I am giving a lecture, of course I'm giving the lecture with the understanding, and not just understanding, with the desire that all of you will understand, right? To the 10th, you'll understand completely what Stuart Hall means by encoding, decoding. But this is my desire, right? This might not be entirely successful, and because of various reasons. And these reasons Stuart Hall is proposing being called as lack of fit. So lack of fit is basically the distortion, right, which happens, or the noise which happens. Or in simple terms, I call them misunderstandings which happen, as a result of which communication does not take fruition. I'll give you a quick example and a funny example. Emojis, right? All of you love emojis. So once I received a message, and I'm kind of still vague in understanding what individual emojis mean, right? And I kind of gave a completely wrong emoji, the laughing sign to a text. And then the other person who received the message got completely offended. You said, I'm saying something serious and you're laughing it out, right? And then I called this person up. I said, no, I was not laughing, I was trying to be on a serious note, and I thought this emoji meant that serious note. So what happened? I intended the message in a similar manner, and the person deciphered it in a completely different context. Because why? What was the lack of fit here? The lack of fit was the not knowing the language. And in this case, it was not the language English or Hindi, but not knowing the language of emojis. Thank you.